So what's up? This is BSP. So today I'm going to talk about a video that I did the other night: the castration, the economic castration of black men in America. There was a lot of topics that I covered in there because I was going through a timeline. I watched the video a few times and I know there's a lot more things I could have said on there. I was just trying to stick to my timeline and make sure that I really got that message out to everyone. Um, so I watched the video this morning, and this is happening all over the country. But this one really shocked me. This one really shocked me because if you guys know anything about the U.S., Atlanta is the Black Mecca. Was the Black Mecca. Atlanta was the Black Mecca. Yes, Atlanta, Georgia, was the Black Mecca. And I mean, anybody know and as black know when you mention Atlanta, we're like, oh yeah, Atlanta's black businesses, all kind of things like black mayor, a lot of things black in Atlanta. But what I learned in this video I was watching is that before 2000, Atlanta was 61% black. Now Atlanta is less than 48% black. It's about 47% black now and dropping. And this goes back to what I was saying about how the system will push us out, has a way of pushing us out of our areas where you never think you'd ever leave, right? So what they were saying in this article was that a lot of these immigrants are coming in. I remember this because I remember hearing about this back in the mid 2000s when some Latinos were saying, "Oh yeah, I'm from Atlanta. I'm from this." I'm like, "What? What the fuck? It's Latino in Atlanta? What?" Because when I thought about Latino, I thought about you got people of Mexican descent living out in California, Colorado, mainly out west, and then of course we have a lot of our Puerto Ricans living up where I grew up at in Philly and New York, and they're cemented up in there. We were all up in there, right? But I never really would thought that Latinos would be living in the deep South until I started seeing this happening about almost 20 years ago. I thought, okay, maybe they got a few in there and they like to live there because, they get along with the brothers and everything is all good to go. But fast forward to now, and you have, and then I didn't even know that I was kind of shocked about this because there was a murder back in 21. This white boy killed like 8 people in this Korean massage parlor up there in Decatur. I think it's Duluth, I think it's Duluth, Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta. And they said they had a lot of Asian businesses up in there, Korean businesses and whatnot. And then I started to see, when I watched this video today, there's an area where they have a lot of like South Asians, like Indian, Pakistanis living in one area. And then they have, like I said, Latinos, Asian. And so, look, what this is doing, and the sad part about this is, America likes to say, we like to be, we're an immigration nation and whatnot. We're a nation of migrants. There you go, nation of immigrants is what they like to say. But the reality of it all is that a lot of these immigrants that come into the United States are given low interest loans to open businesses, this, that, the other, things that blacks ourselves are not getting, right? We're not getting any of this. They're giving this to all these guys, so they come in and they're building their businesses, and regardless of how you come into the States, when you own a business, guess what? It makes it's an easier path for you to get to U.S. citizenship. It's an easier way for you to stay. Like I said, the way it works on the H-1B visa. So a lot of these people didn't come on the H-1B visa. They came in seeking asylum and whatnot, and somehow their relatives brought them over, because I know that happens a lot. Their relatives will bring them over to the States, and then they'll sponsor them, and then next boom, they start getting their citizenship, and then it starts growing and growing and growing. They building and building and building. They borrowing. They set the businesses up, that kind of thing. And next there's 50,000 South Koreans living in this area, right? So, and then there's like 100,000 Indians living here, and there's like 300,000 Latinos living there. And it builds up and builds up. But the problem with this whole thing is that it's so unfair to black Americans. Even they got African living in, like Ghanaian, Nigerian, Cameroonian moving over to Atlanta. That's a growing community there. And like this article was saying, they may have the same face, the same skin color, but they have um, totally different ways of doing things, totally different backgrounds from us. They are not connected to the slave trade. They're not descendants of the enslaved. They didn't experience the Jim Crow. They didn't experience a lot of things that we Black Americans have experienced, and that is one of the big reasons why a lot of blacks did not support Kamala Harris when she was running for president, and a lot of blacks were complaining when Obama was president, because both of those politicians were not directly tied to the slave trade. They were not. I mean, to the enslaved. They were not directly tied to the enslaved. So, therefore, they did not go through the experience, and are still not going through the experience, or like us Black Americans are. Even though, I know Kamala grew up in Oakland, and you can't get no black and living in Oakland. I know that, but still, you're not tied to the Black experience, and that's what years ago I was telling people, and I told them, do not call me an African American. I am not an African American. An African American is an immigrant from Africa. I am an American. I'm a Black American. If you want to label me as by my skin color, you don't see people running around saying, "Oh yeah, he's a white American. He's a white American." No, they just say an American for them, but then they want to label everybody else. But yet, my people have been here just as long as the Europeans have. You see what I'm saying? Because I know I'm part European, 10% European, but still, it's apparent. My people have been in this country over 400 years, and so to me, the way it should be is that black and white should be at the top of the food chain in the United States. We went through our slavery, but then we got our reparations, and we got, compensated for our ancestors. If they got compensated for all their hard work and the bad treatment they got, then black and white would be living in the nice, really nice areas and nice places, and then be like the whites. Oh yeah, bring the immigrants in. Now I got me a Thai restaurant. I got me a South Korean restaurant. I can give me this cuisine, that cuisine. Go to their neighborhoods. Ooh, look at this. I'm walking around little South Korea, little Thailand. Look at this. And then go back to our beautiful neighborhoods. And, because we've been here longest. But that is not the case. That is not the case. The whites are the only ones that are really at the top of the food chain. And a lot of them don't even talk about it. So if you think about it, the unemployment rate, oh yeah, 4%. 4% unemployment is full employment. The reason why it's that low, because a lot of people are no longer reporting themselves as unemployed, so therefore they don't count them. So the unemployment rate is a lot higher than you think, right? But they have these ways now, these systematic ways of shoveling numbers under the table and making things look bad, calling it fake news if the real stuff comes out. They have a lot of ways of saying shit that, it just kind of concocts a whole different situation to where the average ignorant person will start to believe the bullshit, and then next you hear people talking about, oh yeah, the blacks didn't want money when they were enslaved because they just didn't accept it. Some kind of shit that they got written in some history books around the States. See? But talking about how immigrants are affecting the black community, I don't want to call it a cancer, but it's an erosion of our society. And it's because blacks are not getting the support. We never got the support. Now, somebody might say, well, y'all had affirmative action, and you had this, and you had that in the 60s. Affirmative action, I just told you earlier, doesn't mean shit when the companies will hire a black woman or an Asian woman or a Mexican woman and say, look, I got a woman and I got a minority. What I'm trying to say to you is blacks don't need to be coupled in with people of color or all these. They're basically treating us like immigrants in our own country, but they're not giving us the support that they give to immigrants. So we're getting treated like immigrants, but we're not gaining support. But you want to know what's funny about that getting treated like immigrant thing? I didn't start really becoming successful until I started acting like an immigrant in this country. In America. I don't live in America anymore. I didn't become successful until I started thinking like an immigrant. And the reason what I'm getting at is this. When I was in car sales, when I was in sales, I sold cars from 2001 to 2008, and then from 2008 till 2010 when I went back to school for IT. I was in the mortgage business. So when you were, and then I was selling cars. I was a finance manager, and then I sold cars again. Then I went to mortgage. Well, when you are in sales, and you get clients, you get to see a lot of the clients' information because they're filling out credit applications. So they got to put down their salary, of course, their job information, so that way you can go ahead and do a loan for them to be able to purchase a house or to buy a car, right? So when I was in Hawaii, I saw a lot of like blue collar people coming in without homes, but then they were living with, they were basically homeless, but they were living with their grandmom and their mom, like 3 families in a little house. But they had the income, but they just didn't have the income to afford a house, but then enough income to buy a car. Then I moved back to the mainland states up in Washington State, up in Seattle, and Bellevue, and rich, they call the East Side, Bellevue, Redmond, Issaquah, really affluent area. And I noticed that a lot of my South Asian customers and Asian customers were coming in, and they were getting paid serious money, and most of them were working in the IT world. And that's when I went back to school. I decided, well, I'm going to go in the IT. And I also looked at the average household income in the United States, and or the national household income levels, and I noticed that Indian South Asians were the top, averaging like just over 6 figures in household income compared to blacks, which are averaging just under $50,000 a year, right? Which is a big disparity. Whites, I think, fell in around 86,000, something to that effect. So still, that's pretty high. So what I did was then I targeted myself toward what are the Indians doing? And it's funny because when I was working, when I got in the IT world, I went to school. I graduated in 2011 with a certificate in IT after going to school almost 2 years. And then I started off contracting, and then I was still a contractor, but I got a job hired on with an Indian company in Bellevue. This Indian guy hired me. So I'm always going to, be grateful for that. And they took me under their arm. They treated me really well. I met some friends there that I was hanging out with them after work. They hired me on as a PHP developer. And I remember telling the guy in the interview, his name was John, and I said, man, I don't know a lot about PHP, man. I'm mainly doing these other stuff, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, web building websites. He said, don't worry about it, Tony, just Google it. That's what he told me. He told me straight to my face, Tony, just Google it. And I said, well, why are you bringing me on? He said, I'm bringing you on because you talk well. Your communication skills are very good from the sales experience. Because before I went into sales, I wasn't a good communicator. Okay? I'd get the message across. I knew about things, but I just couldn't. The words weren't flowing out of my mouth as well until I got into sales. And I learned in sales how to talk. And that's what I'm getting at is if you brothers are having a hard time communicating, which a lot of you may not be getting these positions because you can't communicate well, but I know that's not true because even when you can, brothers with degree, you're still not getting positions, I know. But to help you with your cause, you need to be able to communicate. So sales helped me communicate really well. I remember I'd be sitting down, and here's one, I just want to get into this one a little bit. So here's what would help me out. So I'd like this table in my ear, I'm sitting on the table. I'd be sitting down at the table like this, and a husband and wife sitting across from me, white, South Asian, whoever. And these people are making some serious coin, and here I am in sales. And I have to sit there and know how to talk to these people. And they'd sit there, and I'd say, okay, well, we'd go back because we negotiate back and forth on what they wanted to do. They'd sit there and say, hey, well, I really like the car, but this payment is way too high. And I'd say, well, yes, the car is going to cost, it's just the type of vehicle that you're getting is going to run you about $550 a month payment because, we had come back with the numbers already. And they're like, well, those numbers are a little bit too high for me. We're not budgeted for that. Just take the other, husband and wife. I'm going back and forth with them. And I say, well, look, let's see if we can put together a good budget for you here. Give me a second. I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at one more thing. I just thought about something else. Give me 1 minute. I'll be right back. I go back. I come back. I say, hey, they wanted the payment, say about $550. And, and I come back. I say, hey, I got great news for you. I got good news for your payment. I got your payment at $615 a month. And this is what I got for you as well here too. And you can also get this as well. And then I stick my hand out and say, congratulations. And I'll just go and get your driver's license, your insurance card, and I'll go and copy that for you. And they're like, oh, thank you, Tony. You did so well. I literally bumped them up in payment. But then because I knew how to communicate with them, they accepted and they went ahead and did a deal. Which is why I was a top salesman when I was selling cars. I was a top salesman. So, and when I was doing mortgage, I was a top mortgage guy. Even when the market was bad, I worked at auction sites, that type of thing. So my communication skills got stronger and stronger and stronger. And I believe that that's what finally landed me a full-time IT position because of my communication skills. And so when Jamin hired me on, and that was basically about three jobs before I became a full-time IT person at another company. When Jamin hired me on as a PHP developer, he said, don't worry, Google it, because he had a couple customers that needed some PHP code written up for their programs, and I was able to do that. That's when he told me, because of your communication skills, and that's when I knew, okay, great. And that's what literally gave me the advantage over other IT guys. So I want to bring that out there, so I just throwing that out. But so anyway, the reason why I brought up the Indian company in my little experience is because what all these people like Jamis and the guys that was an Indian run company, that person that founded that company used to work for Microsoft. So they came over on an H-1B visa, and then they went ahead and did all the research on how to open up a software business. And Microsoft was so busy that they needed to spin off their business to other companies. So the Indians knew what they needed to do. They knew what projects were coming up. So they would start up a company, and then they would take that business that Microsoft needed, and they would work that Microsoft, and then they would build other customers, find other clients. Now they got Microsoft, they got this client here, they got the client there, they got the client there, building up their process. I mean, they had me working on things like Jenkins projects, which Jenkins was hard as shit. PHP and them Jenkins and moving that shit over was hard. Taking this guy from this one to AWS, taking this guy from AWS to Azure, all kind of things they had me working on, right? So they had their fingers in all of that. That's why they were able to build their little companies. And guess what? They would become American citizens because now they got a business, and then they would hire more Indians from over in India on H-1B, and then they would themselves would turn around and get the boom, 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 and now they got their citizenship, and that's what happens. Luckily for me, I was able to work for that company, and they brought me on. So I don't want to get up here and say that that Indian companies aren't hiring us, because I was hired. But then again, I was the only one hired. Most of them aren't hiring us. Okay, I should say that most of them aren't hiring us. And what I mean too is, so like in Atlanta area, just use that area, and keep in mind, this could be Houston, Oakland, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Philadelphia, a lot of Detroit, DC, anywhere you have a large black population. This is happening all over the nation. But I just use Atlanta because I was just so shocked that Atlanta was up there. But so these communities coming in, these immigrants coming in, the Koreans, the Latinos, the South Asians, the Africans, these communities are not built for us, Black Americans. There's nothing in there for us. Yeah, you might be making a little bit of coin, and you might take your wife or your girlfriend to a Korean restaurant in Koreatown, or an Indian restaurant in Indiaville, or whatever the case may be, or a Mexican restaurant here in Latinoville. But when you go to these different businesses and you look around, you won't see any black faces working there. You'll see only other people that fall into the same groups working in there. So they're building these communities, but these communities are not for us. And we are being pushed out of these major cities into these areas where there's less amenities, where there's less transportation, where there's less of everything. And I give you an example too. I just saw another article this morning, because I'm from Philly, and it just popped up and said SEPTA, which is a Southeast Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, has shut down over 50 bus routes in Philly and shutting down rail lines, and the subways and trains will not run after 9 o'clock. When I seen that, I was like, you said what? Because I grew up in Philly, and I grew up using the public transportation systems. Not only me, but blacks, people in general. A lot of people use public transportation. Mainly blacks, we depend on it because most people I knew did not have cars in Philly. My mother didn't have a car. My grandmother didn't have a car. My auntie didn't have a car. My uncle didn't have a car. I mean, they had a car like maybe a few years of marriage, but then he couldn't drive anyway because you don't need a car in Philly. But my daddy had a car because, of course, he was a policeman, so you need a car to get around the city, and he lived in areas where, you needed to have a car. But most people I knew growing up and most families I knew did not have cars. So because the transportation system was so good, which is why today in Japan, I still love taking the trolley cars, the subways, the Shinkansen. Philly didn't have a Shinkansen, of course, but Philly had the trolley car, like the 23 trolley. That was the longest route in the city from 10th and Bigler all the way up to Chestnut Hill. I would take that one a lot. I still remember the L bus, the C bus, a lot of routes that I take. I used to ride the Broad Street line, which is a north-south line in Philly all the time. I used to always want to drive the Market Frankfurt line, but I didn't drive it much because I didn't live out that way in West Philly, up the Frankfurt area. I still remember a lot of the routes, the 48. I remember a lot of these routes. But I don't know which one of those routes was shut down, but I do know that when you shut down 50 routes and they say, right 5 days before school start this year, because this video I watched was 5 days ago, so then they said, well, when school starts, people are going to have a hard time getting this. Of course they're going to have a hard time getting around, because that's all they use. And one thing I want to say too, and Philly is a big city. It's 148 square miles. It's big. And I remember when I was younger, when I was about 10, 11 years old, 12, me and my little brother who was 8, we walked from where I lived in West Oak Lane all the way downtown and back. Yeah, we walked all the way down to City Hall, because down Broad Street. We ended up, eventually got to Broad Street, and we walked all the way down through various neighborhoods. And because I knew that was the safest place to walk was on Broad Street. We went through Logan, we went through North Philly, we went through Spring Garden, we just kept going down, milled around downtown, did the Parkway, did Independence Hall. When we were done, we didn't have really any money, so we didn't eat nothing, and then we ended up walking back home, right? Another 7 miles. We didn't get home until it was dark, so we walked, told that day probably walked about 15, 20 miles just hanging around one hot summer day. So, but I'm here to tell you, that is not an option for these people that can't get the transportation on the buses, because guess what? You got to walk through 5 or 6 or 7 different gang territories. Just like me, I grew up in Philly. So now, as soon as I saw that article and watched that article on the SEPTA cutting down the transportation, I was like, oh shit. That means I would have had to walk through Kamak. These old gangs that grew up in Philly. So when you hear these gangs and you're from Philly, you're going to recognize what I'm talking about. Oh shit, I got to walk through Kamak and Butler, 9th and Erie, Zulu Nation, 5th and Allegheny. I got to walk just through, if depending on where you got to go, you might have to go through those different areas. And then in Philly, a lot of gangs would only have like the one block. Like, oh man, I got to go through Lambert Street. Shit, I got to walk through Lambert Street. Then they're going to beat my ass. So by the time you go from, say, and you don't even need to be in the gang, they're still going to do your shit. So you see me with my transitions on, my Adidas on, I got my gold around my neck, I got my watch on my arm, I'm just showing you these things. I got shoes on my feet. By the time I get to catching the bus, I got to go to get to school, I done lost these, I done lost the earring in my ear, I done lost the chain on my neck, I done lost the watch, because different neighborhoods, depending on how I'm trying to hide shit, going to take my shit. My backpack is gone. Lambert Street taking my backpack. Kamak and Butler taking my shoes. 5th and Allegheny, they're going to take my glasses. Zulu Nation, they're going to take this. You know what I'm saying? Kamak and Butler. So, Nice Town going to take this. See? So, there's a lot of gangs in Philly, and I don't know how they're bordered today, but I know growing up, you knew where the gang territories were more than you knew what the zip codes were on the map. So now imagine you now needing to walk through these gang territories because they shut down 50 bus routes to catch the bus to go to work or to go to school. That's not the happiest moment. Even if you're an adult, you still got people gritting on you, wondering, where you from? And they lunching for you, they waiting for you. Oh man, this fool coming up here from hey, I remember that nigga from Huntington Park. Oh man, that's a fool from Huntington Park. What you doing around 9th Erie, nigga? That's what they gonna be saying. Where you from, motherfucker? Where you from? That's how they talk. And in Philly, if you say, man, I'm not from nowhere, man, then that means you from the biggest gang in the world, and you ain't from nowhere, then that's the biggest gang in the world, motherfucker. Give it up. That's how they talk. And that's what you want to deal with every single day. these people wanted to deal with that shit now that SEPTA and shut down this. It's all because of a $40 million deal when SEPTA, well run, generates $30 billion worth of business in Philadelphia. $30 billion. Granted, black people ain't getting a lot of that money, but still, Philadelphia has had one of the best transportation systems in the world. And now they fucking with that. They fucking with it in Pittsburgh. They fucking with it in Dallas. They fucking with it in a lot of different cities. And a lot of people that use the public transportation, a lot of black people use public transportation. So now couple that with gentrification, where you got blacks being forced out of these major cities, out into areas that were formerly white. Now, where people were used to driving cars, now you got blacks out there with no cars and no bus routes and no way. And just the train, if they be lucky, they get on the train around there. And what if a lot of blacks work the night shift? Now the subway talking about they're going to stop running after 9 o'clock. How they going to get home? Or how they going to get to work? You see, this is all by design. There's all kind of shit. And Philly is, the stupid thing about Philly is next year they got the World Cup coming. They got the 250th anniversary of the Constitution. A lot of people going to be converging on Philly. The tourism going to be big. How they going to get around? These public transportation helps tourists get around the city to see things. They going to spend, they going to eat. Tourists got to eat, right? No matter what, they got to eat. Even if they don't buy a thing, they still got to eat. So they're going to get in there, they're going to spend their money on food, this, that, the other. They got to get around. They got to move around the city. See? So this is a major problem for Philadelphia, a major problem. But like I said, getting back to what I was talking about the Atlanta thing, how blacks are being moved out, gentrified out. They're moving you out of your neighborhoods. Now they got these big high-rise condominiums coming in. You got white joggers running around the street, crossing, like I said, red, black, and green pedestrian markings, buying collard green scones at Starbucks. And then the worst thing is when they say, oh yeah, this used to be where they had the jazz scene there. Now the businesses are making money on what used to be there that was popular, that was famous. Now they got tourists coming in, spending money at their businesses off of black things, off of black history. And blacks ain't even in sight. Ain't getting a goddamn dime off it. But yet they making money off of the tourism of former black neighborhoods. Oh, this is where Martin Luther King used to live. This is where he grew up at. Ain't a black in sight. Oh, look, Dick, we want to take you to this. We'll show you. See, this is where he was at. It's gonna cost you $15, but this is where his house was at. You see what I'm saying? And blacks are not getting nothing off of that. So, with all this erosion and a couple, like I said, black people, you going around looking for, I'm just gonna say black people, black jobs. You going around looking for black jobs from Korean establishments, Indian establishments, Latino establishments, white establishments. All these people encircling you ain't gonna get no jobs. And they still got some black businesses in Atlanta, but they're starting to dwindle now. They're starting to dwindle because, like I said, blacks can't even really start the businesses like they want because they're not getting the support from the government that the immigrants are getting. These people get low interest loans to start a business. Blacks ain't getting a goddamn thing. Did we get a reparations check? No. We never got one reparations check. See? And then yet people come out and say, well, you just need to do your best. You just need to work harder. Work harder? First of all, how the fuck you gonna get a job? You're not even getting a job. You're not getting anything. You're an able-bodied person in the best time of your life, the most physically active time in your life, and you're not able to work. That is in itself cruelty. That in itself is cruelty. When you're a young 20-year-old buck and you can't get a goddamn job, that is just cruel and unjust. That's cruel and unjust. So I know I talk a lot about the problems, but I'm going to talk about the solutions. I was going to save some of these solutions for my members only thing, but I just wanted to bring an update on that too. So I'm not going to be monetizing my channel at this point. I'm going to do that a little bit later on. I'm not going to monetize the channel right now because I did some research, and because I'm making so much money in my investments, once I start making all this money on YouTube, they're going to tax me even more. I don't know what, I'll be in such a higher tax bracket that it won't be feasible for me. It doesn't benefit me to monetize my YouTube channel right now. So I'm going to have to wait till later on to do that. So I just want to bring that out. So that's why I won't be doing the membership thing right now. I'll just be doing all my videos up here right now, and it is what it is. But that's where I'm at. I told you guys I'm gonna be transparent. Yeah, a lot of these people out here making this money on YouTube. They're making some serious coin on YouTube, but to me, the YouTube coin is not guaranteed, and I don't want to get taxed on, inconsistent funding here and fuck around and have to pay this tax this year and that tax this year. So, you know me, I look at numbers really hard, and I keep myself in the best financial situation possible. And right now, I'm in the best financial situation possible. So there you go. All right. So, like I said, let me get back to what I was saying. So see, we're being moved out. We're being pushed out to where we don't really have a place to go. Now you might have some, like Tyler Perry's did that thing where we got a lot of black millionaires in Atlanta, and he's got his studio there and everything like that. That's a silver lining right now. But I am always talking about the average black American that is out there trying to make it, trying to get started. I just had a brother reach out to me in the comments saying how he graduated and he can't get a goddamn good job either. You know, and he's a professional, he speaks well, he's educated, but, you know, they don't want to hire. They don't really want to hire a masculine brother. You know, somebody that's going to bring some meat to the table. They don't want to bring the meat to the table. Okay? They want to bring some vegetables, but they don't want to bring no meat. See? So, brothers, I'm here to tell you, you need to work, get better at your communication skills. I know that's not going to be the only way to get you in the job. And you also need to start thinking entrepreneurial. And, brothers, I'm going to tell you another thing out here. I know if my brother Saeed over there in Nigeria sees this, he's going to agree with me. What you brothers need to start doing is you need to start looking at Africa. You need to start looking at Africa. Because Africa has unlimited resources. Unlimited resources. The Chinese are over in Africa right now. Japan is now starting to go over there. They just had some big thing in Japan where they were saying they was going to open up 4 cities over here for special Africans with special skills. That was bullshit. That was fake news. Probably put out by some enemy of Japan. You know, Chinese have a tendency to put out a lot of bullshit on Japan. You know, we already know they fucked up with the COVID. They messed up the Japanese Olympics. They did that shit on purpose. We know that. They threw that COVID out there. Let's just call it what it is. It's true. The Chinese government put that shit out there. All right, so we know that. So they're trying to do things against Japan that are unfair. But I'm not going to go into that. I could just be talking out the side of my neck on that. I don't have any facts on that, but I got a good inkling that that's what happened. But I'm not up here to put out fake shit. I'm not up here to put out shit that I can't back up. So let me just go ahead and keep my mouth shut on that. But what I do know is that you need to start thinking entrepreneurial. Now, brother's probably saying, well, goddamn, how am I going to do that? I got no money. What you need to do is you need to work on your investments. If you need to find a way, if you got to get a job cleaning some goddamn bodies, toilets, just to get those funds in there. Get those funds into investments and start making that money. And once you get enough investments, then you need to start looking at Africa. Africa, I know brothers been talking about this for years, but Africa, unlimited resources, trust me, Africans will be super rich. I mentioned this before, in the future, so rich, they'll outpace Arabs. They'll outpace any other group of rich people you saw, Russians, whatever. They will outpace them to the point to where a Russian billionaire would be standing next to an African and he'd be like, yeah, get out of my face. I'm good to go. That's the point. That's how rich people, once Africans get a hold of those resources over there and they get rid of the corruption and they get out from under that European thumb, then you're going to see this thing blow up. So you need to start establishing ties with Africa because America, brothers, is not for you. America's not for you. I mean, I live in Japan. You can even come to Japan and start your business. And with ties to it to Africa if you want to do it that way. Because a good thing about living in Japan is your cost of living is going to be lower. You can be safe here. There's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about like you have to worry about in the States. There's just so much shit hanging around your head, always swirling around your head, that you no longer have to worry about if you're living in another country. So what you do is you set that thing up to where you can get some investments. You get your ass out of the States, then you start looking at other places to invest your money to where you can see your investments grow. Because the United States, brothers, for all intents and purposes, is no longer for us. It never really was for us, and we're starting to wake up to that. It's just not our place, brothers. It's not. I know you see there's some successful black people out here, and we can make a lot of money in the U.S. and this, that, the other. Well, if you are making money in the U.S., still you need to get out. You need to have that plan in the back of your head I'm just gonna milk this cow and get my ass on out of here. Because all U.S. really is one big cow, and everybody's milking it. The immigrants are milking it. You think these South Koreans are leaving their money in the U.S.? No, they're living in the States, but they're sending their money back home. Indians, they're in the States, but they're building gigantic mansions back in their places in India and making those places better. And to the point that when they return to India one day, because they will, trust me, they will, because the whites are going to set it up to where they can get rid of them too. They keep telling them, don't get comfortable Indian, don't get comfortable Mexican, don't get comfortable South Korean, don't get comfortable Pakistani, because those motherfuckers will find a way to get you out too. So what I'm trying to say is whatever you see happening to Black Americans will one day happen to you. Yes, if it exists, it will exist. That's all I say. If it exists, it will exist. So you will see that shit happen to you too. Trust me, you will be. You may think, oh, I'm the smartest Indian in the world. I'm not going to do it. They will not be able to do this to me. No, they will do it to you too. Trust me. They will beat that shit up. Donald Trump is strict on immigration. Even without Donald Trump, even when he's long dead and gone, those people have woken up. The white racists have woken up in the States, and they will find a way to maneuver your ass out of position. If they like the city that you built up, if they like where you at, trust me, they will be in there taking that shit over. And all they do is they bring in the white boy with all the money. He buys up a few development, build a development around your ass, and next you know, you got Yehu in there standing there with his little AKs and whatever the fuck they want to carry. You got the coming in there, taking over your neighborhood, gentrifying even your asses out. Trust me, that's what they do. So be ready for it, be prepared. But I'm here to tell the brothers, we are not part of the fold. We are not people of color. We are Black Americans, and we need to focus on what it needs, how Black Americans can be successful, how Black Americans can solve this issue, because nobody else can solve it for us, brothers. Nobody. So this is BSP. I just want to give you guys a little bit of heads up on what's going on. I'm out. I'll talk to you soon.